So why was the skull of the Pachycephalosaurus shaped in this peculiar way, with this weird dome at the top of the head? Well, it's a bit of a mystery really, and paleontologists don't necessarily agree on the exact answer to this question. Some studies insist that it's a textbook case of natural selection, that it was most probably a fighting tool used in territorial contests, where competing individuals would crash head-on against each other, while other research suggests that it was covered in brightly colored skin, making this attribute more like a secondary sex characteristic, very useful to attract potential sexual partners. And the same to and fro between natural selection on the one hand and sexual selection on the other also exists in the scientific literature about the neck frill of the Triceratops, for instance. Well, these animals admittedly lived more than 65 million years ago, but if you think that this tug-of-war between theories relying on the survival of the fittest and others depending on the selection of the sexiest, if you think that this debate has been settled when it comes to explaining some of the more striking features of currently living dinosaurs, that is birds, let me introduce you to my top book recommendation for this spring, Birds, Sex and Beauty, written by Matt Ridley and published by HarperCollins. It really is a captivating book, very well written, very well argued. It focuses mainly on the alleged role played by sexual selection in shaping sexual dimorphism in animals and more particularly in birds. After all, why is it that in some bird species individuals of one sex can be so extravagantly beautiful? In our everyday life, of course, we take sexual dimorphism for granted, mostly because it is present in our own species, Homo sapiens. If you're a woman in a heterosexual relationship, for instance, your male partner will, on average, be 8% taller than yourself. So we are kind of used to it, but when you think about it, in birds, not all species show obvious anatomical differences between males and females. If you happen to walk by the pond in Hyde Park, for instance, admittedly you can easily distinguish wild duck male and female individuals just by looking at them. But when it comes to other common species like swans or pigeons, determining the sex of a given bird just by looking at it is really another kettle of fish. So what are the rules underpinning sexual dimorphism? And maybe more interestingly, why should it lead in some bird species to emergent features that are aesthetically so very pleasing to the human eye? Can sexual selection be a strong enough force to account for it all? And if so, which sex is doing the selection exactly, and upon which criteria? Matt Ridley in this book very convincingly, I think, argues that the version of sexual selection that cannot ultimately be reduced to any utilitarian rationale has been and continues to be undeservedly underrated, not only in ornithology, the study of birds, but in the field of evolutionary biology as a whole. Indeed, the controversy is by no means confined or limited to ornithology. In humans, for instance, you've probably noticed that our eyeballs are peculiar in being so white as compared to other species, which is something that has puzzled scientists for quite a while. And the consensus that emerged crystallized around a theory called the CEH for cooperative eye hypothesis. But very recently, this mainstream view has been challenged on the ground that it was, in fact, poorly supported by actual evidence, which led scientists to consider alternatives. And one of the proposed alternatives is none other than sexual selection. If you want to probe a bit deeper into this, have a look, for instance, at this paper by Juan Perea Garcia and colleagues, published in May 2025. Coming back to the book Birds, Sex and Beauty, we learn in it that this pendulum swing between natural and sexual selection as competing explanatory frameworks for sexual dimorphism goes back to Charles Darwin, who essentially introduced the idea of sexual selection to his peers. And this idea was right off the bat met by strong and vigorous pushback, in particular from Alfred Russel Wallace, the co-founder of the theory of evolution by natural selection. And the pendulum has kept swinging ever since, its momentum being kept alive and sustained by successive generations of biologists on both sides of the argument. There are, of course, plenty of books on birds and on nature in general, and on how magnificent it is and how we should bask in its beauty, and I love these books. But this book is different. This book, however, gives you a glimpse into what happens next. What's the next step? What happens when scientists interested in discovering meaningful patterns take up the challenge of looking for answers to specific questions raised by their observation of nature. That's where we follow Matt Ridley, not only inside freezing hides at impossible hours of the night to maybe catch a glimpse of some elusive bird, but also onto tracks of scientists all over the world who work tirelessly to try and crack this puzzle of sexual selection. So the guiding thread running through this book is really the sheer obsessiveness that drives these scientists. While most of us, when bird watching, stop at how beautiful birds are, in this book we are introduced to people in Brazil, Finland, the US and elsewhere whose curiosity makes them go way beyond that. They rigorously collect data, often for years, then organize it in models and run clever inferential statistics on them to hopefully one day come up with interesting findings. So actually, to me, the main takeaway from this book may be its emphasis on how difficult it can be to reach a scientific consensus in a given field of research. Most of the time, scientific inquiry implies not only hard work, obviously, but also plenty of controversy, which sometimes involves putting your reputation as a scientist, if not your career, on the line. But ultimately, that's probably also what makes science so interesting and stimulating. So this book is also a quite engaging tribute to the scientific enterprise. In that regard, this book dovetails quite nicely with The Red Queen, which was Matt Ridley's first book, published in 1993, where he wrote, quote, "This book is crammed with original ideas, very few of them my own. My role has been to connect the patches of others' research together into a quilt," unquote. So, is this a book on animal behaviour? Is it for bird enthusiasts? Does it belong to history of science bookshelves? Or is it more of a manifesto on how science should be done? Well, it's all that and more, but trust me, not in a confusing way. This book can arguably be seen more like an academic research paper, but which would have been done by someone who actually thought deeply about user experience. It is, as I said, very well written, with a nice crescendo, to the effect that when you reach chapter 8, you've already been introduced to a lot of information and intriguing ideas. But then again, you're astonished by chapter 9 on the peafowl, and then by chapter 10 on the curious case of the raft. And that's even before Matt Ridley turns his focus on potential implications of sexual selection in human evolution. Because, of course, the pachycephalosaurs were not the only bipedal species that ended up with a ballooning skull. I love scientific mysteries, writes Matt Ridley in this book, and it is a brilliant attempt at making that remarkable spirit of curiosity infectious and, dare I say, viral. Because it does what the best books on science do. It leaves you at the end with a real obsession in mind. These books invite you to find your obsession about the natural world. For what species of animal or plant, for what star or planetary system would you be ready to spend days in a freezing hut and still find the ordeal worthwhile? I'm personally wondering about plants in this context, and the analogy would be the following. Each time we walk in a field dotted with flowers in bloom, we are in fact witnessing a group of living organisms displaying their sexual attributes through the display of bright colors, aren't we? But isn't that essentially what the black grouse males are doing when lacking? That is, when they are displaying for choosy females in exactly the same place year after year after year. Admittedly, sexual selection in plants has its limits, mostly because most of them are hermaphrodites, but there's definitely a similar runaway process whereby angiosperms, flowering plants, became so exquisitely beautiful through selection by pollinators. After all, it is also common practice among love-struck men to offer flowers to their prospective partners, almost like a proxy peacock's tail. And the fact that plants are sessile and don't move much, I don't personally find a very convincing rebuttal. Because after all, males in legs are also essentially static during the whole lacking season. What do you think? All things being equal, could the case be made that the bee orchid, for instance, and the peacock's tail are beautiful for the same underlying reason? Is this a case of convergent evolution towards enlarged and colorful sexual attributes? Or is the analogy a bit too far-fetched? Tell me what you think in the comments. So that's it for this book review. I really hope that you enjoy Bird, Sex and Beauty by Matt Ridley as much as I did. I would love to hear your thoughts about it and to know if you are also seeing legs everywhere after finishing reading the book, or is it just me? I would also love to hear what your favorite books are for this season, so I'll look forward to talking with you in the comments, and I also look forward to seeing you in the next one. Until then, as always, thanks a lot for watching and have a wonderful day. Maybe not bee orchids, but I'm pretty sure spring gentians are lacking. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're lacking.